Ladies and gentlemen, start your engines.
Welcome back to the Wasteland, ladies and gentlemen, as the newest installment in the cinematic franchise known as Mad Max hits theaters. Except this time, there's no Max, and quite frankly, I'm just mad. Or more like disappointed, I guess. Anyways, let's do this. And yeah, I'm gonna hold the mic like this because Chris Hemsworth does it in the movie, and it's kind of cool. I don't know, kind of quirky. So I'm staying on theme, okay? Anyways, Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, stars Anya Taylor-Joy and Chris Hemsworth as they face off in an epic revenge tale set in a post-apocalyptic Australian desert hellscape known only as the Wasteland. And speaking of waste, this film to me was basically an overglorified FX reel, overstuffed with pretentious trailer-style shots and action sequences that overstimulate the viewer and completely overshadow any depth in the story and character development when it's all said and done. George Miller sure knows how to put a budget on the big screen, but to me, this was simply a futile exercise in filmmaking. You know, a classic action over story, sensory overload that rings hollow at the end of the day. And despite its attempts to draw empathy from the audience for our titular character, Furiosa herself, her performance kind of fell flat and the character herself didn't quite grab hold of me. Although Anya's pretty hot, so I wish she would grab hold of me. Anyways, she's not quite full girl boss in this film, despite any YouTube videos claiming that this is woke bullshit. It's not quite that, okay? She's a girl, she's kind of a boss, but she does get her ass kicked as well. She's not magically fighting off 200-pound men with a crowbar. It's just not happening in this movie, so props for that. However, that being said, Anya Taylor-Joy is quite stale and super one-note in this movie, just like Mad Max himself, but without any of the notable quirks outside of a missing arm and an overtly serious statuesque thousand-yard stare that could give even Medusa a run for her money. Yeah, she looks angry all the time, just like Chani in Dune 2, you know? Kind of that kind of vibe. Except I think Anya Taylor-Joy is a better actor than Zendaya, if you ask me. But I digress. Seriously, I think Furiosa, Anya Taylor-Joy, has about one or two different facial expressions and emotions throughout the entire film. It's very one note. And like I said, Max himself is kind of like that, but he's a little more quirky. He's a little more zany. She just is kind of boring. I'm not trying to hate. This is just how I felt. Boring characters exist in movies, unfortunately, and for me, this was one of them. And no, I didn't go into this film wanting to hate it. I don't have an anti-girl boss agenda. I don't have an anti-woke agenda. I just want to see a good movie. Boy, girl, in between, robots. I just want good characters. You know what I mean? Okay, so don't come at me in the comments about that shit. Going back to my sentiment about Furiosa being very one note, even, hard to empathize with, Furiosa apparently feels no pain ever throughout this movie, as even when her arm gets cut off and broken, she barely flinches, barely makes a noise, just kind of barely grits her teeth. I mean, it's cool to have a character feel no pain, but when they don't feel the pain, the audience doesn't feel the pain, and I was not empathizing with this character whatsoever during the whole film. She does make a believable action hero. She pulls off the stunt driving. She pulls off the gritty, serious emotion, but that's about the extent of her character. I found it really hard to truly get inside of her head and feel something. I just wanted to feel something, and this film did not bring that for me. Now, our other main character, the villain, Dementus, played by Chris Hemsworth, is oddly charming and even somewhat likable, despite being a villain. He's by far the best, most charismatic character on screen, and without him, this movie would likely have a lot less charm. Now, people say his prosthetic nose looked terrible in the movie. I think they're just hating because maybe there was only one shot where I thought it was questionable. Throughout the rest of the movie, the prosthetics on his face are downright spectacular. So props to the makeup department, props to the production department for making this movie really look good for the most part. Outside of Hemsworth, every other character in this film is just a villainous goon or a henchman outside of, Immortal Joe, the leader of the Citadel, from the first film, the guy with the mask and the gray hair, that fat guy with the, you know what I'm talking about. Oh, and the History Man, which is this cool old dude with tattoos on his face. He kind of helps narrate and set the tone for the film, providing some kind of, eerie, spooky, philosophical background knowledge here and there with little nuggets dropped throughout the film. He's kind of a cool character. We don't get too much from him, but, he is a standout compared to, every other side character in the movie, which there are very few. Now, there is another character who I call Mad Max Jr. or Mad Max Light. What is his name? Hold on. I gotta find his name. The character was so boring, I forgot his name. They said it like twice. So Mad Max Light is called Praetorian Jack. He's basically a war rig driver, similar to Furiosa in the previous film. She's at the head of the caravan, driving around resources for the Citadel. Citadel. But he's essentially kind of a Mad Max character, very stoic, heroic action star who, just gets it done with Furiosa. Although he kind of, at one point, just leaves the film. I don't know, it was a very unceremonious death. That's the only spoiler I'm dropping in this review, by the way. But yes, very one-note character yet again. Nothing from him stood out in the film. He was just there to help Furiosa's story along, basically. Now, they didn't do him dirty. They didn't do any woke shit where Furiosa pushed him aside and girl bossed her way. No, they worked together pretty good on screen, for what it's worth. It was handled with care and with balance, and I actually appreciated them on screen together, despite how boring they actually were. It still worked. It just wasn't that exciting. Now that we've talked about the characters, or lack thereof, let's talk about the plot. And I'll be doing this in a relatively spoiler-free manner, so feel free to keep watching if you still want to see the movie for yourself. I mean, not that there's really anything crazy to spoil in this one. Anyways, it's a pretty straightforward story premise. The premise of this story is that it's a basic revenge tale that follows Furiosa from a young age as she suffers a tragedy early on in her life, thrusting her into a savage pursuit of vengeance. There's not really many twists or turns in this plot, guys. It's very much just a standard John Wick-style revenge action story where our main character has to suffer through complex action sequences to eventually reach her ultimate goal, to murder the man who took something so dear from her when she was a child. Classic tale, right? Classic tale. Nothing much to write home about if you ask me. This story kind of bored me to the point where I fell asleep in my first viewing and I had to go back and watch it a second time. Kind of embarrassing, I know, but hey, it is what it is. I made the sacrifice for you guys. And that's all I'm going to say about the story, guys, just because this is a spoiler-free review and I still want you to be able to watch the movie for yourself. Now that we've covered this story, guys, let's talk about the technical aspects of this film. And here's where the film shines, but not without tripping over itself along the way. The camera work and action is, as expected from veteran action filmmaker George Miller, gloriously crafted and well thought out for the most part. There were a few questionable lapses in scene logic here and there, but I was kind of willing to forgive them as it was just really beautiful to look at. So, I give that a pass sometimes. Funny how that works. It's kind of like a Transformers movie, you just kind of let it wash over you. Although it's more intelligent than Transformers when it comes to comparisons. Now, the problem arises when your whole story leans on action as a crutch. This can start to become overbearing. And so I often found my thoughts drifting off to another dimension towards the end of some of the more lengthy action sequences. Hell, I think there's a part in the movie where it feels like Furiosa is trapped under a truck for about 5 minutes straight, and I was losing my mind. The film just really felt trapped under its own weight with some of these overtly drawn out scenes, which also sacrificed a lot of screen time that could be used to build story, lore, and character. So I was a little bit disappointed by that. People told me there was a lot of world building in this film, and yes, there was some world building, but not quite as much as I expected from all the hype from the reviews that I saw prior. Don't get your hopes up too much if you're going in looking for a super lore heavy Mad Max movie. It doesn't quite reach those heights. And when it's all said and done, guys, this film is just a less compelling version of what came before it. But this time, it's a female action hero. Cool. But wait, technically, we already got that with the prior Mad Max film, as Furiosa nearly shared screen time with our titular character, Max himself, in that film. It really was a Furiosa movie as well, like split down the middle. In fact, I think she had more effect on the plot in that movie than Max himself did, but I digress. This is basically Furiosa 2 in my eyes. I mean, when you break it down, we already had one Furiosa movie in the can, and I don't think anyone was quite clamoring for another one, if I'm going to be honest. If you like the previous film, however, you still might be entertained by this one, but I highly doubt you'll come out thinking that this was the superior product, because it simply isn't. If you're a fan of the Fast and Furious movies, you might enjoy this film as well because of the action, but the difference there is Fast and Furious has a big cast of enjoyable, likable, recognizable characters and actors that you just get joy out of hanging out with on screen in the theater. And Furiosa just simply doesn't have such characters. It's a very dry film outside of Hemsworth. Now, my take, I would just save your money and wait to take your date out to Deadpool 3 when that comes out, because that's going to be a real fun one. I'm willing to bet my life savings on it. Now, I give this movie a 6 out of 10 in this spoiler-free review, simply because of the production value, the action, and Chris Hemsworth character. Cool character, fun guy. Anyways, guys, those are my thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this review of Furiosa, a Mad Max Saga, or Furiosa 2, as I call it. That's all I got for you. This has been Stark Cinema. I love you 3000.